And before we go there more formally, I do want to share a little bit more about Sharon, who's actually the one that pulled me into this conversation. So I'm happy to be able to brag about her for a few minutes. So number one, super excited to bring her to the stage. Sharon has served as a business development leader in the tech industry for 25 years. And as Vice President of Alliances for North America, Sharon ensures the Microsoft and ISV relationships are tightly managed and empower Hitachi's field with programs and tools to support customer growth. She's committed to women in technology initiatives, proven by everything she's done on her long resume, which I just love, and has served as president of the Chicago WIC chapter and is currently a regional leader for the WIC network. And as a member of Microsoft's Women in the Channel Committee, she is helping to lead an inclusive work environment initiative. She's founder of the MSH Empowers community and is working to grow the number of women in leadership roles as evidenced by everything going on here today. So Sharon, over to you.
Thank you so much, Diane. And wow, the energy that has been built to this session already is incredible. Great way to kick things off, Allison. Gail, you nailed it. And I'm going to remember that prayer statement that you made. And your conversation did not, your power talk did not disappoint, Diane. It was even better, more energy filled than when you and I interviewed. So thank you all so much. At this time, I'd like to invite our amazing panelists. Speaking of great interview conversations, I had the great pleasure to talk with each panelist at length and really understand what is important to them, what their priorities are, and learn a lot about their stories. And I can't wait to get started. So Chandra, Kim, and Liz, can you please join me?
Hey there.
Hello, welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Everyone join me in welcoming Chandra Sanders, Liz Sarah, and Kim Stevens. I know you've already heard their amazing backgrounds and bios, so let's go ahead and just start the panel conversation. What I'd like to do is kick things off with you, Chandra. When we started our conversation, you began by telling me about your own experience of re-entering the workforce. And while you weren't out of the workforce for a long period of time, it was really interesting the special issues and challenges as a mom, as a woman of color, a parent of 3, I'm sure are amazing children, that you confronted, that you had to deal with. And there's a lot of delicious lessons learned in that story. So can you please share a little bit more with the audience?
Of course. There were many times that I had to hide the fact that I was a mom because there are many stereotypes and biases associated with that, such as like having to take off from work, not being available after hours, and the list goes on. So I felt the pressure to hide a part of who I was because a lot of times I was working around men who didn't understand my need for work-life balance. Also women who hadn't had the chance to be a mother yet. So all those sorts of pressures allowed me to, or made me shrink a part of myself, the most important part of myself, the part that I'm a mom, a woman, and there's so much power in that. A couple of years ago, while entering into the tech space, I just decided to own who I was. Like there's no more hiding that. Being a mom, being a woman of color has made me who I am. And it's a very powerful thing. And I take all of the experience of both being a mom and a woman of color. I bring that to the workplace and I use that in order to fuel my passion, fuel my company, and fuel the mission.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And in our notes, and thank you for bringing up owned, because I had that in capital letters. You had also mentioned that you weren't going to apologize for who you were in your circumstances. And you actually took that part of you and you turned it into a positive, which we're going to learn a little bit more about your current role later. So thank you for that great answer. I'd like to move on to Liz now. And we started our conversation with a deep dive into what you do right now at the National Women's Business Council and what your responsibilities as chairman of the board are. The mission and the purpose of the council are great, but what I really found interesting were the 3 top priorities that you and your team are focusing on at this time. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Sure. So the council, for those that haven't heard of it, and I'm sure there are many that haven't, and one of our goals for this year is to raise our visibility. We're actually a federal agency based in DC, and we totally and 100% have one mission, which is to advocate for women business owners and female founders. So rather than looking at workforce issues, we're looking at entrepreneurial issues, and we're looking at what are the challenges that are holding women back as they're trying to get their startup off the ground or as they're trying to grow the company that they already have in place. So as an entrepreneur myself, co-founder of a couple of software companies, I took my experiences in starting those companies and trying to raise money and trying to hire people and trying to, grow the business over the years. And I said, many of the challenges that I faced are still very common today. One, access to capital. So that has become one of our major three-pronged, areas of focus. The second area of focus is, and I think it's really relevant to this conference today and the business that all of you are in, is how do we get women, young women, even women at school age, who might have entrepreneurial aspirations to start thinking about starting a company in a STEM-related industry instead of the many traditional businesses that women tend to start. Now, I'm not saying that those are not important types of companies. They're the boutiques, the bakeries, the coffee shops, the yoga studios. They're all the kinds of businesses that make the communities we live in very vibrant. And very often we choose where we live because of the kinds of amenities that women are starting and operating and running. But we need more women at the ownership level to have a presence at the state level, at the national level, and at the global level. And that isn't going to happen with a neighborhood bakery or a neighborhood restaurant. So how we're going to do that is going to take more than just our council. It's going to take many other organizations in the private sector and all of us. And then the third area that we're focusing on is how can we help women that are located in rural communities get those new businesses going and grow those businesses that they have in place, because they don't have the resources that many of us who are living and working in big cities from Boston to Dallas to Los Angeles have. They don't have the networking. They don't have the support centers. They don't have the angel investor groups to help them with that early seed funding. So those are the three areas for the last 3 years that I have been chair. We have been focusing on recommendations. So as a council, it's our role every year to come up with very specific policy suggestions to Congress, to the White House, to other federal agencies, including the SBA, on things that they can do. And for this particular council, this term, it's many ideas in each of these three areas.
I love that overview, and there's actually more to come, everyone, based on what Liz was shared, but it was so enriching to know that this service is out there and knowing that your priorities and the energy behind driving them forward is top of mind. So thank you. All right, let's move on to Kim. And, Kim, one of the great things that we talked about, especially with the reentering the workforce kind of focus and mission of this session, it's a good time, a great opportunity actually to pivot on your career, to maybe do something different. And while we did have a chance to talk about your career journey and how you landed at the channel company, before that, you shared some really interesting insight about how you started your career in technology, and yet you weren't very passionate about tech. So the journey has a really cool thread to it and lessons learned. So I know that the audience would love to hear more.
Oh, I appreciate that, Sharon. I'm just so glad to be amongst these insanely amazing women. So, so my journey, I worked, let me step back. My dad worked for IBM and his dad worked for IBM. So I was a third generation. I thought, well, I have to work for IBM. That just makes sense, right? And so I graduated with a computer science degree, got a job at IBM. I had no idea what I was going to be doing. And by the way, although I could do the computer science, I could program, I did not like it at all,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what else to do, right? So I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to follow in these footsteps. It's a family legacy. So I went and I got a job as a systems engineer at IBM, and I could do the job, but I didn't really love it. And at that point, there was a moment where IBM was making a strategic change where all of their pre-sales engineers had to charge for their time. And I thought, gosh, that's just pushing me deeper and deeper into this technical field, which again, I could do, but I so did not enjoy it. So I made this, I call it a religious change, to go into sales, which I don't know why, I just had this bad taste in my mouth about sales. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this, but I did it. And I did okay. I, was able to provide for the family. And I have just sort of, I would say it's been a crooked road, but in a beautiful way, where I was doing sales and I was successful at it. And then I just sort of got into, I just call it a rut. And somebody said, well, why don't you talk to this woman she does channel management? And I'm like, what's the channel? I had no idea what that was. And I met with her, and she, to this day, was so influential in my career and my journey. So I made the change to go into channel, and I've just been there for the last 25 years or so. And I've done so many different things. Usually, you'd progress, you'd be a sales rep, you'd crush that, you'd be a sales manager, maybe move on up from there. But I went from being a sales rep, and I did some field marketing, and then I did some product management, and then I did some program management, and then I was a first line manager. So I've been a VP, I've been all these different things. Always sort of like, okay, I can do this, but gosh, this was not feeding my soul. But I call it the golden handcuffs. You sort of get trapped in providing for your family, right? And so now I fast forward to now, I feel like all of those roads led me to where I am right now, which is I'm leading a women's community. It's an online community to support women in tech. And I'm at the risk of crying. I'm just going to say every day is a blessing to get up. And I have not felt this way about work in a long time. And I just feel like I understand tech. I can hang with the best of them, but I don't have to talk tech necessarily. And now I can help support women in their journey and just hopefully, leave some sort of an inspiration to somebody, right? So it's just been a blessing.
And actually, I'm so glad that you used that word. You used that word twice, by the way. I had highlighted that in our feedback, and how you had shared how excited you are about leveraging your lessons learned and mistakes made along the way with someone else. So I think if there's a bottle of wine in your and Gail's future somewhere, because it sounds like you have some pretty similar experiences as far as just being true to yourself and realizing what you don't want to do. So thank you for that, and being so open and vulnerable. I'd actually like to bounce back to Liz right now, because there is another great resource that you talked about. And this came about during our conversation when we were discussing networking and how important networking is. And especially now, you heard the numbers that Gail shared with women leaving. It's one of the biggest struggles when you're trying to find a job, let alone you've been disconnected from the workforce for a certain period of time. Where are your sponsors? Where are your peers? Where can you get support from women that are currently in the workforce? So I would love to talk a little bit more about the resource that we talked about with regards to networking, and how people can access and really the breadth and depth of it, because there's a lot to it.
Sure. And so I see networking as critical to people that are even in their current jobs and like them and want to stay in them. So networking and mentoring, I think, are really important resources that really didn't exist when I first started my software companies back in the 90s. There were no networking groups. There were no incubators or accelerators in place. We basically, for those of us that took that leap to start a company, either alone or with co-founders, had to figure it out on our own. And there was a lot of trial and error. So fortunately, fast forward 30 years, there are so many resources in place today to help women that are in a job in a large organization or are thinking about starting their own organization. Just one little interesting fact, I just read this data point that came out about a week ago. As bad as last year was, with the closures, with companies losing business and going out of business, 1.5 million new businesses were started. And many of those were started by women, although I don't have the exact numbers. And so women have a tendency that when there is a need and necessity strikes and you can't find that job, go create a company on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So from a networking standpoint, I look at what's available in the communities that we all live in from the private sector, and there are loads of incubators where there are colleges and universities, there are entrepreneurship centers that are not only focused on their campus and their student body, but also want to have the community involved on both sides of that networking and mentoring equation. So they want business leaders to come and help talk to the students, but they also want to provide services to help the community grow in its entrepreneurship. Another big source of networks for mentoring and for helping in the whole business planning is an organization that the Small Business Administration has put together for quite a long time, which is called SCORE. And it's a national network of about 10,000 individuals, mostly hired business executives. Unfortunately, we don't have as many women involved in SCORE. And we are, as a council, encouraging that SCORE organization to step it up in bringing more women, bringing women of diverse company backgrounds into that network, because the important thing that we hear as we've been doing roundtables around the country with women business owners and the support systems to small businesses is that women need to see a role model that looks like them. And so often, the mentors that a lot of these large agencies have in place are just too many retired white men. And when I look at the difference between the women that are of the 20 and 30-year-old generation, that is not the role model that is going to resonate with them. And I'd like to put encouragement to everyone that's in our session today to think of yourself as a role model and a potential mentor. You don't have to be 50 or 60 years old. You don't have to be the founder of a company that's $100 million in sales. The things that you have learned to get to where you are things that someone 10 years or 20 years younger than you could benefit from.
Yeah, that's what a beautiful way to close out your reply and your response. And I am really just, my heart is melting as I read the comments in the chat window. So thank you, everyone, and keep them going. All right, so on to Chandra again. And earlier, in your opening response, you were vulnerable and shared your plight, about how you weren't afraid to put yourself out there. But you had some other interesting insights around the skill sets and abilities that, as a mom, you bring to the table. And as mothers, I think it's important that we be reminded of these skill sets. And then as potential employers who are also in the audience, be aware. And I think just overall, when it comes to working moms or coming back to the workforce after having done one of the hardest jobs, really raising a family, there's some qualities there that can't be taught. So can you share kind of your insight and opinions on this?
Of course, and I'm extremely passionate about this topic. So honestly, moms are the CEOs, the COOs, and the CFOs of their families. There are so many transferable skills within the role of a mom that you can actually go and do any job. I've used all of my skills, which is why I decided to own who I am, own that I'm a mom, because it's powerful. We're the ultimate problem solvers, the ultimate program and project managers. We are mediators, we're conflict resolvers, we're everything. So there's not a role in a company that we can't add value to. I know oftentimes that we've been undervalued, but it's time. Now is the time. We are needed in the workplace today, and we have a lot of valuable transferable skills to offer. We just have to own that, own everything that we've learned in our pause. Just, when you become a mom, that's a certain level of growth. Within that growth, you take it and you use it and you transfer that into the workplace. So again, we're the ultimate CEOs. We're the CEOs, the CFOs, and the COOs of our homes. And if we can do it at home, we can definitely transfer that into the workplace.
Yeah, and what I hope, and thank you, that was one of my favorite parts of our conversation, that working mothers or women going back into the workforce, that channel that and have it be a confidence builder for you, as compared to, oh, I have a gap in my resume and I don't have there's also a technical gap in my skills, or I don't have the experience after being out for 3, 5, 10 years. Look what you've been doing. And I would love women to just remind themselves of that and create this mantra and use that to actually empower and fuel you when you are starting to lack some confidence with pursuing the next job. So great. So I would now like to go to Kim. And, we talked quite a bit, and I love the conversation, the story about your dad, the connection to IBM. You had a story about being at IBM and pivoting, and you had some pretty strong, I'll say some strong opinions about managing your career as you went ahead and rose your hand, spoke up because you weren't happy in your role. But I'd like to go a little bit deeper on the pivot piece, if you wouldn't mind. And when you were directed to the channel role, it was something that you had not done before. And there's a word that you used a couple of times that I'm going to remind you if you don't bring it up. But you manage the fear of, and I'll let you fill in the blank, see if you remember from our conversation. But I really appreciated and respected you talking about managing the fear of. Do you remember the name? Failure. Yes, you're managing the fear of failure. So can you go ahead and talk on that some more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my folks raised me to just believe in myself. And so there was a part of me that just felt sort of open-minded to changes. So, going from, let's say, a sales position to, say, a marketing position, to me was not unusual. I'm like, why couldn't I do that? And so I was open to that. But I tell you what, though, there was still that other side of me that was like that little voice, that darn internal voice that would whisper some nasty things to me, like, oh, you can't do this. What are you doing? Who are you kidding? Right. And so I still moved forward, but there was always that inner voice. And so one of the things that I have learned is that my journey is different than anybody else's, and it doesn't make it better or worse than anybody else's, right? It is the journey that God put me on, and I'm going to pick up things as I go. I learned things from people that I would never do. I've worked for managers where I'm like, okay, mental note, never going to do that. And then I've learned from some people that I'm like, holy cow, if I could just be a fraction of what they are, that would be amazing. So I just find that whatever journey any of you guys are on, don't judge yourself, right? Be in that moment and absorb what you can learn from that, and just add that to your bag of tricks. That's the way I just sort of looked at it. And I use that to go forward. I'm telling you though, the whole time that little voice was still there. It is starting to get quieter. Maybe that's just a sign of me just being sick of it, and just wanting to get past that. But I also think when I look back and I look at the kids that I've raised and been married for 30 years, and I'm just so grateful for that. And that to me is what matters. And how I got here is just been just some life experiences that to me now, in this current role of being able to support women in tech, I look back and I think, okay, all those, like Gail was saying, you'd wake up just miserable. Like you want to put, the covers over your head. You don't want to get up. Oh my gosh. Every Sunday night I'd have the Sunday night blues because I'd be entering into another week of where you just don't want to go. But again, I look back now and I'm like, it got me to where I am. And I have 2 healthy kids, a great marriage. And now I get to work, and now I can't wait to get to work. That's honestly, in 25 years, this is the first time I can say that. So
nothing better than having that fresh, energized spirit. So again, thanks for sharing how you kind of manage and these reminders that you continue to replay to yourself to make sure that you push failure down, or the fear of failure down, so that you can get to where you're at right now. So last round of questions. I'm going to go back to Liz. One thing that we talked about before we closed was working in IT doesn't necessarily mean you have to write code. and that there's a lot of opportunities, regardless of the level, to support the IT industry, serve as that mentor, someone in the middle or higher end of the ladder with regards to your skill set. I loved your point of view on this and what you talked about, and I would love for you to share that with the audience.
It's so important in terms of how we can encourage more women to enter the workforce in a STEM-related area, or even start a company in a STEM-related field. I started and built 2 software companies, and my background is business and marketing and nothing related to technology. But for me, the technology was exciting, not in so much as, look at this code that I could write, because I wouldn't know a line of code from a line of anything else, but rather from what it does for people, how it changes the way we do our job, or how it changes the way we buy groceries instead of walking into the store. It just changes our interactions with people and with institutions. And to me, that was the exciting part about getting involved in technology. To me, that is the message that we need to communicate. It's get involved in doing a job that you're good at in an industry that is something that delivers excitement for you. I would never in a million years think about getting any kind of technology certification for myself, because where I see my strength in the technology roles that I play in helping my clients is looking at the business and helping them navigate through a growth phase that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do on their own. Do they have the right pricing? Do they have the right product mix? Are they going after the right audience? And as women, we tend to think that we can't start a company in a chemical field or a manufacturing field unless we're a manufacturing background. And that's so not true. And so I think we need to broaden the definition of what it means to be a founder, to be an entrepreneur. And it's assembling a team that delivers the skill sets of the things that you lack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to know it all, and actually it's better if you don't, because you want that pool of diverse opinions and insight. And thank you for sharing that. There was one sentence I quickly wanted that you shared that I'd like to share with the audience. You said what I thought was really special about your answer was your openness about why you love technology. And it's not because you like to deliver it, but because this appreciation you have for what technology and how technology improves our lives and impacts our lives. So quick challenge from Sharon is for those of you that are mentors or talking to women that are nervous about the technology industry or because they don't have tech skills, be open-minded and encourage them. The technology industry needs lawyers and finance people and salespeople and HR. And we can show up in the technology industry in a leadership role in non-tech positions as well. So Chandra, to go on to you, actually, I'd like you to give a quick plug on the Mom Project, which is an amazing organization. However, there's a question, there's some good votes. So I'd kind of like to couple your quick commercial for the Mom Project. One of the questions targeted to you is I would be interested in knowing Chandra's position on the concept that childcare is actually infrastructure that is as important as roads, hospitals, buildings, and power supplies.
Of course. The Mom Project, very near and dear to my heart. It's a leader for helping businesses attract and retain female talent. We have a community of over 350,000 women in the platform currently, and we're connected with over 2,000 companies. And we're honestly building a better workplace for moms who so often feel undervalued and are often underrepresented. To answer the question about the childcare and infrastructure, I wholeheartedly believe in that. It's going to take some time because honestly, people have just started valuing moms. So it's going to take a little bit of time to actually bring it full circle to actually start valuing childcare too. I think that we will work together to do both. There is a lot of work to be done, but we are on the road to make progress there.
Jay. Actually, there's another two-parter. It's asked, what changed or motivated you to bring your entire self to work / how did you find the courage to break the fear? You've been very proud and brave about being authentic and not apologetic about being a mom.
I think after I had my last child, who's 3, every child, I feel like every time you have a kid, it brings a certain level of growth. And so you become a different person. And I decided after that, like I haven't worked in an office since 2017. I've been a consultant, but I did travel. But to be in an office 8 to 5, no, that just did not fit my life. So I just decided to own who I was. And if a company didn't appreciate me, then that just wasn't the company for me. So I just valued myself more and valued what I wanted and what was most important to me over just making money.
Right. Great. Thank you. So we are at time, but I see there's some really great questions in here in the chat window, in the Q&A window. So what I'd like to encourage everyone to do, because I'm now going to introduce our session sponsor, Meg Johnson, but then we have 30 minutes. You have all 30 minutes with this amazing women, with Allison, with Gail. So I'm going to recommend that we take your questions, any questions that weren't answered, and when we are in the networking lounge, go ahead and seek out your panelist or your speaker and have that conversation, that